So I've probably picked the worst time to do this because I have a cold and I've got my retainer in. So I'm going to be lisping and sniffing my way through this. But it is important for me, so no time like the present. Yeah. Obviously my journaling has become more sparse as time's gone on. Obviously with my last couple kind of referencing my struggles physically, mentally, and hopefully this video is more of a progression. Doesn't have to be, strictly positive, but hopefully it is something that is indicative of a process. And there are elements of my personal life that I feel by journaling is a good way of understanding and also dealing with and putting aside some issues. So that's what this is for. I do apologise about the sniffing. I'm going to try and limit it, but probably won't be that much. Firstly, over recent times, I've kind of come to the idea of the fact that I've come to the idea of the fact that I am dealing with some sort of addiction. The good thing about doing this video is, one, it's a recognition of that, and two, it's a way of establishing kind of where I think it's from and how I can deal with that. So kind of since the events that kind of instigated this whole thing towards the start of this year, I have since developed a sort of addiction to what's not gonna broccoli. Call it broccoli. Not the actual vegetable, if you're wondering, but I've developed somewhat of an addiction to where for every evening for the past, I'd say 6 months now, I've had to smoke, and it's not large amounts. I don't go through a lot and smoke excessively, but it is to a point where over the recent days and weeks that I've become aware of it being less and less of a choice and more of a need. And I'll come to address kind of why I think that is. And if anyone is to see this that has any idea on any other things that could be a catalyst of bringing this upon myself, then I'd be open to ideas. But obviously, these aren't made for people's opinions. It's made for my own. Oh, come on, nose. So, for myself, I think that it stems from a fear. That's why it tends to be only a nighttime thing, because kind of as it gets to yeah, as it gets to that point in the day where it becomes darker and you tend to be more alone, that's when your mind starts playing tricks on you. And for myself, I find using that as a form of escapism from my own thoughts, because of fear of depression. I think I'm afraid to be depressed, to admit that I am depressed, to feel that kind of feeling. I feel emotions a lot stronger than the typical person, and I find they affect me physically as well as mentally. And so I found that, having something that can ease that stress and the anxiety of experiencing that initially was, it was a conscious thing of, if I am smoking, then it gives my brain a little bit of, serotonin, a little bit of happiness, and kind of dulls that part of my brain that I don't want to address or don't want to come to light, especially in the evening, because I battle with being alone, and for me personally, being left with my thoughts for an extended period of time only spells bad news. And yeah, it stems from that fear, and it's got to a point now where it's become less conscious. It would be an occasion that it would hit about 9 p.m. every evening, and subconsciously I'd go to spark up, and even though on some nights I might not be feeling the emotions that I want to escape from, and yet I would still do it. And it's become more and more apparent that it's having a bad effect on me, because like I said, it stopped being a conscious thing. I stopped doing it because of an action and just doing it for the sake of it. And it is from a kind of fear I don't want to address. I'm not very good at heartbreak, I guess you can call it that, but the kind of feeling of being alone after being in a relationship is tough for me. I know that a part of my neurodivergency is that I long to have an eternal physical partner. I am always seeking kind of someone to share my life with, to have someone that I know is kind of there for me and reciprocating the love that I want to give and receive. So the kind of separation from situations that I perceive as being that kind of long-term goal that I want has a big toll on me, and it becomes harder for my mind to get to grips with kind of why that's happened and why I'm feeling the way I am. And I think that's where the kind of start of this stemmed from. Because initially, when this whole situation happened, I would have really bad bouts of anxiety to the point where, I wasn't eating for too long, way too long, especially for, someone my size. And typically I'm eating all the time, and I wasn't, because I was filled with so much anxiety. My stomach felt like it was just imploding on myself, and I would use pharmaceuticals to encourage an appetite, or even just to reduce the feeling of anxiety and stress for certain periods of time. And it's frustrating for so many reasons. I have talked about on here before the want of removal of short-term dopamine hits and little successes that a lot of people search for after a period of hardship. Typically people that come out of relationships, you see a lot of them just go in search of pleasure because it's a form of distraction for their brain. And I've talked about how that's an important thing to avoid when trying to heal yourself, because it's further setbacks. And unknowingly I was doing that to myself, but in another way. I was my kind of pleasure, my short-term dopamine was coming from these pharmaceuticals, and it's disappointing for me to be saying something while not fully adhering to it. It makes me feel disingenuous a bit, like my words carry less weight, which is frustrating, because I like to be someone that can just speak truthfully. That's I struggle to kind of have that deceitful personality anyway, and I especially struggle to understand people that act like that. So I try and kind of follow the footsteps of just saying how I feel and being true and honest to my word. And when I don't do that, it's really frustrating for me, especially when I'm not even aware that I'm doing it. It's taken me a few months to even realise, you're saying this, you're putting this out into the world, that the search for short-term pleasure and dopamine is what's going to set you back in the long term, while doing that to myself. So obviously that's the kind of direction that it stems from for me. It's more of just a drowning out the noise. There are times I just find it a bit too hard to kind of cope with the feeling of kind of, it's like a crushing feeling. And it's, in a way, I'm knowingly doing it. I'm very aware of the effects of pharmaceuticals, and how it can affect your mental activity, your physical activity. But I was so desperate to shut out these fears that I have. I was too scared to fall asleep without the use of anything, because of what I experienced in my dreams even. There are some times where, I'd wake up in the morning just in a state, in borderline terror because of what I'm experiencing in my dreams even. So this became a form of an escape for me. And it got to a point where it was almost mind numbing. I wouldn't even allow my brain to try and process things by itself. I would, seek external help for anything. And yeah, like I said, it became a kind of nightly thing. I never kind of stretch it to daily, it never got that bad, and I wasn't going through that much. It would be kind of gram a week, maybe something like that. So it's not excessive, but it's the fact that it was a kind of subconscious daily thing that is the worry, and it's unhealthy. But like I said, it was that kind of terror of having to understand and face the facts that I am in a major setback, probably the biggest that I've gone through up until now. I'm only 22, so I'm sure I have more to experience. But over these months, my physical health is deteriorated, my mental health is deteriorated. I can't do the things that I want to do anymore. I kind of touched upon this in the last video that I made, and again, that's worsened. My days consist of just waking up, existing, having a blood test, every week or so. Doctors trying to figure out why my body's not functioning and not figuring out why, and then I can't exercise because I just injure myself, and all of those things kind of pile on each other, and it makes it very hard for me to have any sort of outlet. I had no means of a release of the negativity that I was feeling or thinking. And it felt unfair, even though I'm fully aware that life is in no way fair, and you have such an impact on any event that happens to you. I was still, think, why is this all happening to me? Why do I have to take so much punishment and have no sign of getting out of it? But luckily, over the last few days have kind of reduced my intake. It's now been about 3 or 4 days since I have inhaled, and I do feel better for it. It feels like progress, which is a good thing, but I'm also struggling with the kind of acceptance that there's the conscious and the unconscious half of my brain is how I feel. I look at it, I feel like there are two sides, and there's this kind of primal side of me that invokes feelings and emotions and thoughts that I don't particularly want to, or I don't even see as being correct, but they're kind of there. And then there's the conscious half of my brain that challenges those, and there becomes a real battle sometimes, because there's a half of my brain that is really afraid, afraid of not having any progression from here, afraid of the kind of coming to terms with that I might not have, a partner. It might not be for me. It might not, it's not for everyone. And that kind of triggers that unconscious part of my brain that has those primal urges that, the parts that are so set on having these things, and there is no reasoning, and that, that becomes another challenge for me to, yeah, I do fear not having that. I do fear not being accepted by anyone, because it has become a tough thing for me. I'm typically seen as the outlier among friend groups and social groups, and every time there's that kind of setback in that area, it just piles that negativity on that I don't consciously realize that I'm doing, until it becomes this apparent, where it feels like a depression. It feels like I'm really down about these things, and that is something that I have to fight, because that brings with it the ease of the snowball effect. From there it can very easily grow into a much bigger and much worse thing, and affects my productivity a lot. I'm finding it harder and harder to do the simplest of things now. There was a time where I was sat in my bed, and just the thought of going to the toilet seemed like too hard of a task for me. The toilet, by the way, is that side of that wall. It's a maybe 5-10 foot walk, and these are things that, once again, there's that kind of 50-50 split, where there's the normal part of my brain that's saying, why is that even a question? It's the easiest of tasks. And then there's the other half of my brain that is so convincing. It's telling me, like, your body can't get up, like you physically can't move, like you don't have enough in you to do that. And that's such a hard thing to deal with, because I don't understand it properly still. And when you don't understand something, it's very hard to find a sort of solution, a means of tackling it. And it's affected me physically as well now. Sometimes eating becomes too much of a task for me. I've lost 95% of the physical progress that I've made over the last 4 or 5 years, it feels like. Parts of my body just don't function like they should or they would, and it's a worrying thing. Obviously there are positives to take, and there always will be positives to take from any negative experience. So I know that if this is something that I can tackle and overcome, it being such a profoundly negative thing means there can only be profound positives. And that's my motivation, is that I know that I'm not sure what it is, but there will be so much that can come from this. And this is the start of that. Like I've touched on before, the acknowledgement is the first step of it. And I can feel that I'm a lot more aware now of some of the subconscious decisions that I make. And I've started to kind of tackle them and fight back against those urges to procrastinate, to delay, to deny. and hopefully it's something that can continue. Hopefully this video is a source of accountability for myself, in that I can hold myself accountable, saying, you know, it's out there now. You've kind of expressed what's going on, and now it's time to start addressing these things. So that's what I need to do. I need to get to grips with the fact that, one, I have stronger sensations than most people will, especially when it comes to relationships. I'll always have that stronger desire for a monogamous partner, a person that accepts me and has the same vision that I have for, you know, the long term. The fact that I do have some sort of addiction that I need to face and keep addressing and keep tackling, and that, you know, tackling the worrying thoughts or emotions that I have are what are going to be the steps to my progression. That's what builds my character. So it's a case of using this as my benchmark to build off of, because I don't want to be in this position for any longer than I need to be. You know, I feel so stuck and a bit helpless at times. You know, I do admit there have been a lot more times recently where the thought of giving up has been strong. And you know, sometimes that still occurs. You know, I still get those thoughts sometimes of, you know, is this kind of my end point? Is there anything after this for me? But these are all things that can make me a better person if I choose to do it, and I'm the only one that can. You know, you can't have anyone else help you on this, and I don't, which is almost a good thing. All the onus is on yourself. So this is my admission of that, and this is my pledge of a beginning of getting out of this.